Here's a story from Grandpa for my three favorite little girls, Emma, Ayla, and Audrey. First, thank you to granddaughter Ayla for recording a couple of videos for this series while I was visiting her and her mom. I really enjoyed her renditions of Mo Willems' I Am Invited to a Party and We Are in a Book. You did a great job, Ayla. Today we have our final installment in the George and Martha series. Thanks to my friend Heather who loaned me her George and Martha collection for this series. But all good things come to an end, and here is part 7. Story number 1, The Clock. George gave Martha a present for her birthday. It's a cuckoo clock, said George. So I see, said Martha. It's nice and loud, said George. So I hear, said Martha. Do you like it? asked George. The next day, George went to Martha's house. Martha was not at home, and the cuckoo clock was not on the wall. Maybe she likes it so much she took it with her, said George. Just then he heard a faint cuckoo, cuckoo, cuckoo. To George's surprise, the cuckoo clock was at the bottom of Martha's laundry basket. When Martha returned, she couldn't look George in the eye. It must have fallen in by mistake, she said. I do hope it isn't broken. Not at all, said George. The paint isn't even chipped, and the clock works just dandy, and the cuckoo hasn't lost its splendid voice. Would you like to borrow it? asked Martha. George was delighted. He found just the right spot for it, too. Wasn't that considerate of Martha to lend me her clock, thought George. Cuckoo, said the clock. You know, when I was in high school, I bought a cuckoo clock and gave it to my parents, and pretty much the same thing happened. They found it annoying after a while and actually turned the cuckoo off. So I guess Martha is to be understood for not liking it all that much. But cuckoo clocks are a lot of fun. Story number 2, The Trip. George invited Martha on an ocean cruise. Is this the boat? said Martha. Use your imagination, said George. I'll try, said Martha. Very soon it was raining cats and dogs. This is unpleasant, said Martha. Use your imagination, said George. Think of it as a thrilling storm at sea. I'll try, said Martha. Lunch is served, said George, and he gave Martha a soggy cracker. Martha was not impressed. Use your imagination, said George. Oh, looky, said Martha. What a pretty shark. A shark, cried George. George took a spill. But where's the shark, he said. Really, said Martha, you must learn to use your imagination. Story number 3, The Artist. George was painting in oils. That ocean doesn't look right, said Martha. Add some more blue. And that sand looks all wrong. Add a bit more yellow. Please, said George. Artists don't like interference. But Martha just couldn't help herself. Those palm trees look funny, she said. That does it, said George. See if you can do better. And he went off in a huff. My, said Martha. Some artists are so touchy. And she began to make a few little improvements. When George returned, Martha proudly displayed the painting. George was flabbergasted. You've ruined it, he cried. I'm sorry you feel that way, said Martha. I like it. Martha was one of those artists who aren't a bit touchy. Story number 4, The Attic. One cold and stormy night, George decided to peek into the attic. Go on up, said Martha. Oh, no, said George. There might be a ghost up there, or a skeleton, or a vampire, or maybe even some werewolves. Ooh, goody, said Martha. Let's investigate. But there wasn't much to see in the attic, only a box of old rubber bands. George was disappointed. Would you like to hear a story that will give you some goosebumps? asked Martha. You bet, said George. When you hear it, your bones will grow cold, said Martha. Ooh, said George. Your blood will curdle, said Martha. Ooh, said George. and you'll feel mummy fingers up and down your spine, said Martha. Stop, cried George. I can't take any more. Tell me some other time. That night, Martha went to bed with a light on. She had a bad case of goosebumps. The last story, The Surprise. One late summer morning, George had a wicked idea. I shouldn't, he said. I really shouldn't. But he just couldn't help himself. Here comes the rain, he cried. Egads, cried Martha. Looks like George turned the hose on her. Martha was thoroughly drenched and as mad as a wet hen. That did it, she said. We are no longer on speaking terms. I was only horsing around, said George, but Martha was unmoved. The next morning, Martha read a funny story. I can't wait to tell George, she said. Then she remembered that she and George were no longer on speaking terms. Around noon, Martha heard a joke on the radio. George will love this one, she said. But she and George weren't speaking. In the late afternoon, Martha observed the first autumn leaf fall to the ground. Autumn is George's favorite season, she said. Another leaf came swirling down. That does it, said Martha. Martha went straight to George's house. I forgive you, she said. George was delighted to be back on speaking terms. Good friends just can't stay cross for long, said George. You can say that again, said Martha, and together they watched the autumn arrive. But when summer rolled around again, Martha was ready and waiting. What do you suppose she's going to do with that garden hose? And that's the end of the story. I really like this George and Martha series, and I'm a bit sad to see it end. But I know we'll find a lot of other great stories to read, and I'm looking forward to discovering them. I hope you are too. Always remember that Grandpa loves you, and I hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.